Well, fight fans, it's another week of fights. The UFC is off, but Invicta is back after the pandemic here with its first event. I am Riley here for the Shootin' the Shit podcast here on the Loudmouth MMA Network. This podcast will also be an interview on combatpress.com, so please check it out on that website as well. Give Rob Tatum and the crew some love over there. Before we get started and I introduce my guests, I do want to plug our one sponsor here. This is obviously for our Illinois fans, since that's our biggest fan base. If you guys are looking for home improvement work done at your house, contact Cornelius & Sons on Facebook.com. They will do anything in your house that you would like at affordable prices, and Raul is a great guy, and he takes care of you. So, again, if you'd like to contact them for any of your home improvement work, it is Cornelius & Sons on Facebook. Again, tell them I sent you. Like I said, they've done work on my house a couple weeks ago. It was great stuff. So, again, that is Cornelius & Sons on Facebook. Now, our guest today for I believe this is our 8th or 9th episode. I don't remember off the top of my head. She is headlining the aforementioned Invicta card this Friday. Sorry, I'm going to say Friday. It is Emily Ducote, who will be taking on Juliana Lima, UFC veteran. Emily, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for coming on the show. Especially, very rarely do we get headliners around here. We had Jake Shields last week, who's a former headliner, so it's nice to have an actual current fighter who's still headlines with us this week. So first thing we want to talk about, obviously, you've been around for a while. You've had 14 fights as a pro. They have an 8-6 record. Some would say it's not the sexiest looking record, but then you actually look at the resume. You haven't taken any easy fights. Do you think that's what's kind of shaped you as the fighter you've become, because you've become one of the top fighters, especially at strawweight outside the UFC? Do you think that tough strength of schedule has really formed you?
Sure. I never asked for an easy fight, and I've accepted every fight I've ever got offered just because I'm an opportunity person. So if there's an opportunity, a good fight, a good matchup, a good show, whatever, I'm in.
Yeah, and you've taken 2 fights with Bellator champion Ilma McFarlane. One of them went to a decision. The other one, she did score a finish. Do you think that's kind of also prepared you? Because, like I said, in Bellator, especially the one fight, that's a main event slot. And now you're getting a main event slot here. You fought before on an Invicta main event. Do you think that's making it more comfortable as you step into that spotlight, especially with maybe an impending UFC future for you?
Sure. Bellator also was 125, so my normal weight class is 115. Before Bellator and after Bellator was 115. So, knowing that I fought such great opponents at 125 is just, another thing in my book that I've said and done. My last fight was the co-main, but it ended up getting bumped to the main event. Right. So it's cool that I had experienced that and, seen what that was like. And it was awesome. Invicta and Shannon is amazing. So I'm pleased and excited about this main event slot.
For sure. And, you mentioned, right, that McFarlane fight was at 25 and you're fighting at 15. What do you think the difference is between 25 and 15 for you? Obviously, you have to cut more weight, but maybe there's more energy at 25. Can you just kind of tell us the difference between fighting at those 2 weight classes?
When I was signed and fighting for Bellator, I was walking around on weight. So there was zero cut. There's no cut to 125. Before Bellator was 115, and I took that opportunity. I got a fight opportunity from them. I wasn't signed, and so I won that fight, got signed, was in the 125 division, and I was happy for a long time. But by the end, I was just walking around on fight weight, and I just wouldn't gain the weight fight day. So we just felt like it was best for me to drop back down to 115. It's not a hard cut. I feel fantastic at 115, so that's just the right place for me.
Ever to consider 105, or is that too much?
My coach says it's possible, but it's just not on my to-do list yet.
Especially probably because the only major organization that showcases 105ers is Invicta, and obviously UFC is probably the end goal for you, I would assume.
Right.
Yeah, so I was actually smiling because I saw your dog poke its head out in the corner there.
Yeah.
What is that, a pit bull?
Yes, I've got quite a few.
Oh, really? How many are you talking?
I've got 6.
What? How does that work?
It's a wild dog house here, but they're all rescues, and I just got suckered in every time. So
do you have do you live by yourself, or do you have someone helping you out?
Yeah, I mean my boyfriend.
Oh, okay.
handle the 6.
I was gonna say 6 is a lot for one person. That's interesting, but so why do you do that?
I had dogs, and I just kept on, trying to foster for rescues or whatever, and I just cannot let them go. So I ended up with 6.
So I know you're in Oklahoma. And you have to figure that in Oklahoma, I don't know what exact part you're in, but you got to have a lot of countryside to run around and play around with. Is that the case?
Right, and my end goal would be to get some land for these dogs to run around on. So.
Well, there you go. So speaking of, well, not speaking of dogs, but speaking of Kanako Murata, that was your last fight. Super close scorecards from the media and judges all over the place. Do you feel like you won that fight? What could you have done differently? And do you think a win here against Lima gets you that not automatic rematch, but that rematch?
I've got quite a few opinions of that fight, but all in all, I'll just say it was close. I feel like, we both showcased several things, but I felt amazing in that fight. I felt like I did a lot of really great things for myself. So I'm pleased with that fight. The result is what the result is. Can't change it, whining about it, nothing like that. So I do think it was close. But that was a good fight for me just to I feel like I got to showcase a little bit of everything that I've got. And so it was good. And I don't, if Shannon never asked me about a rematch, we'll go down that road, but I'm not one to pick fights or ask for names or anything like that. So after this fight, whatever comes. For sure.
And to the one question, do you think there's anything differently you could have done to score that decision or sway the judges in your favor?
Had I maybe defended 1 or 2 extra or reversed on the ground. She was strong on the ground. Reversals were difficult, but I do feel like I was attacking a lot and defended a lot of takedowns as well. And so maybe just a little bit more aggressive on each level, striking or grappling would have maybe done it.
Sure, and I'm pretty sure she was a collegiate wrestler in Japan, if I'm not mistaken. So obviously a high background there.
Right.
So, moving past the Murata fight, now you enter this stage where gyms are shutting down, global pandemic issues. I try to stay away from these things, but it really is just kind of a hot topic right now with every fighter we've interviewed. How has the shutdown affected you, affected your training? Has your gym stayed open? How's that been working out for you?
So the gym was closed. We had to close. Oklahoma shut down pretty much everything for a period of time, but my boyfriend is the gym owner, so I was able to go into the gym, no classes or anything, but I got my strength conditioning done, work the bag, stuff like that. I did do a lot of outside stuff, kept me busy, but now we're back open. We've been open for a few weeks, everything regular, classes, everything. So it really was a brief complete shutdown, but I was still being busy.
Well, that's good, because I've talked to fighters who really couldn't find a way to do it, and I'm not going to mention any names, but there was one fighter who took a fight recently, and he'd even admitted he hadn't been getting as much or enough training in, and unfortunately he took a loss in that fight. So looking forward into your upcoming fight, you have a UFC veteran. Again, you haven't taken easy fights. This is another one that's not an easy fight. She has a great track record as well. Juliana Lima. What do you see in her? What's not the game plan, because you're obviously not going to give that away, but just describe her as an opponent and what you think you need to do to shut her down.
So obviously, like you said, she's a UFC veteran. I feel like she's got a lot of experience. She's got just a few more fights than me, which is a lot of fights. I feel like she's pretty decently well-rounded. You can't say that about all fighters, but I do feel like she is well-rounded. Striking, wrestling, grappling. I do think she likes striking and grappling a little bit more. I don't know. I don't like to try to plan too hard for what's going to happen in the fight. I do my best, just like my coaches do, to prepare everything before. So, my whole camp, what I'm working on is my striking, my wrestling, and my grappling. I'm working on everything, not one thing specifically, but just to have everything so that when I, fight night, I'm confident wherever it goes and I can push it wherever I feel like is open.
Would you say that she is your strongest opponent on paper to date, or do you think you've fought people that are of a higher level?
I mean, I think she's probably close. I wouldn't say my strongest opponent, but certainly in the top. Certainly in the top.
For sure. Now, this is something that has come up also. There's been a big debate on Twitter, and this more or less doesn't have to do as much with the fight as much as it does with women's MMA, which I follow. I think half of our guests on this show have been women, and I think I've asked a couple of them. I've noticed on Twitter, you tend to post pictures, but they tend to just be training pictures, right? Whereas there's some fighters that tend to put some more provocative pictures on Twitter. Obviously sex sells, especially when it comes to women's fights, because most fans of MMA are men. What do you think about the sex sells, the sex appeal side of fighters marketing themselves? Are you for or against it? What are your thoughts on it?
I think each fighter, everyone's got a different personality. So whatever you feel like you need to do. For me, that's not it. I handle my fight prep and I handle my life just kind of in a, not a quiet, but a more myself, There's people out there that just love posting or love attention or whatever. I feel like if it's for you, do it. Don't do it if you're trying to, if it's not you and you're trying to do it just because you see other fighters doing it, then I'm kind of like, everyone needs to be themselves.
Sure.
So if that's your style, do it.
For sure. And before we get into the Invicta fights, we'll probably go over the top two fights because it's kind of hard to preview your own fight. Living in Oklahoma, what's that like? Just avoiding tornadoes and trying to model the sweet laws in Texas, or what's going on there?
Yeah, tornadoes are a thing. Luckily, I don't think we've had any close calls recently. It's been a pretty good tornado season. But you know what? I like it here. It's a nice little city. If you drive out, you could hit countryside, but it is a city. There is life here. It's cool.
And I'm assuming you're in OKC then.
Yes.
For sure. So what do you do for fun then outside of fighting?
Just in general, I don't do a whole lot, not just because I'm in Oklahoma, but just how I am. I do a lot of dog stuff and I do a lot of gym stuff, and that's pretty much it.
A little bit of an introvert?
A little bit.
Gotcha. All right, so we're not going to preview your fight because it's kind of hard for you to preview your own fight. But we'll take a look at two of the other fights on the card, and then we'll let you go for the broadcast here. We got a co-main event with the atom weights. It's a pretty good fight on paper. Alicia Zappitella, who was actually been on the show a few weeks ago, was an interesting person to talk to, taking on Lindsey Van Zant. Again, with the atom weight being as thin as it is, probably two of the top atom weights, especially in Invicta. Do you have any comment on that fight?
I think that's a fantastic matchup. Zappitella obviously is heavily wrestling based, and she does well with that. And Van Zant is heavily jiu-jitsu based, and she does really well with that. So that's a really interesting matchup, right? Zappitella either decides she wants to stand and strike and beat her that way, or do you want to take her down, control the takedown, risk the submissions? Who knows? But either way, Van Zant has some dangerous submissions, and both of them I feel like are fairly equal striking-wise, but Zappitella with the wrestling will probably be able to dictate, but we'll see where she wants to take it.
For sure, and that's the one thing we always talk about when you have a wrestler versus a grappler, or a wrestler versus a wrestler, or a BJJ versus BJJ. Will this just turn into a glorified kickboxing match? I mean, I can kind of see it, but as you kind of said, Zappitella does have the offensive wrestling edge and defensive, I would guess you could say, from all those years of sprawling on the mat. So I think you're kind of right there. I think she would dictate the pace. I think on the feet, Van Zant does have a little bit of an advantage, so we'll see how that goes. So do you have a prediction for this one?
I am not good with predictions, but I am excited for that fight. That's a very good matchup.
I agree. I will make predictions since that's what I do on the show. I will take Zappitella by decision. It'll be a close fight, and it could be a top contender for a fight of the night, along with your fight and one other on here that I don't think we're going to end up talking about. But there's only 6 fights on this card. I know it was kind of a late last-minute thing, so scrounging together fighters might have been tougher. But luckily, you don't cut a lot of weight, so probably wasn't a problem for you. The other one I wanted to talk about was the next fight below that was a flyweight bout. UFC Ultimate Fighter and longtime Invicta veteran Deanna Bennett returns to the cage. She takes on Victoria Leonardo. Both of them are big show veterans as well. Between, like I said, the UFC, LFA, Invicta, they've been all over the place. Do you got any insight on this one?
This is an interesting matchup. I like this too. Victoria is I think, a heavy striker. That's what she wants. She wants to bang. She doesn't, I mean, she's got technique, but if she needs to throw that out the window and bang, that's what she's going to do. And I also feel like that kind of plays into Bennett too. She's not afraid to just grind it out the whole fight. So I think this is going to be a grinding match. I think whoever grinds harder, I think is going to win this one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when the word grind comes to mind, Deanna Bennett, in terms of women's MMA, is definitely when you think about. She likes to put you against the cage. She likes to suffocate you. Doesn't like to give you a lot of space. She's a close fighter. Leonardo has some good grappling, though. I was watching tape on her. She's actually going to be our prospect in the spotlight for the Invicta card upcoming next week. So check that out on MMA Intel. She's a very good grappler. I remember in that last fight, she lost to Erin Blanchfield in that spectacular head kick knockout. But the first time, I don't know if you remember watching the fight, she took a head kick in the first round that almost knocked her out. And Blanchfield was all over, and somehow she got her wits about her and was able to switch positions and get back to her feet. So she's not a bad grappler.
I agree. She does have good grappling, and they're both very active. So I think that's going to be a really nonstop fight.
For sure. And the other thing is Leonardo's actually a pretty strong fighter, too. If you look at her, she's very thick.
Very big.
Yeah, upper body is very well maintained, obviously, and a strong lower body. So, and that's the thing. Bennett likes to bully people across the cage and grind on them and clinch with them. Might be a little bit tougher against a person as strong as Leonardo.
Right.
So, you said you're not good with predictions. You're not going to make one on this one either?
Both those fights that we talked about are very close. I think it could easily go either way, just depending on strategy of either girl. So I think this is also close, and especially being both such grindy girls, I'm not sure. It depends. If Leonardo gets on top, I think she'll do well. If Bennett can keep it standing and where she wants it, I think she'll do well.
I think that's a solid analysis as well. I will make my predictions. I would say Victoria Leonardo gets back in the win column here. And seeing as the UFC is just signing up Invicta fighters left and right, I mean, a win or two puts you in title contention at this point. I mean, they just snapped up Jin Yu. They just snapped up Kay Hansen. It sounds like Erin Blanchfield might be either on her way to the UFC or the Contender Series. So, I mean, you never know. It's like the Wild West out there. That's why a win in Invicta is huge. Right.
Especially with the short notice stuff. I think that's a big thing with it.
For sure. And now here's the one thing I will ask before I let you go. You get a win here. If the UFC calls, obviously if they call, you're taking the contract. But what if they call and say, hey, Emily, we got a last-minute spot on the Contender Series. Would you consider taking a Contender Series fight?
Sure. Like I said, I'm an opportunity-based person, so I have a hard time passing up anything. If it's a good opportunity, we're in.
Awesome. Well, Emily, we really thank you for your time. I know you're in fight camp right now, so I'm sure time is limited. Take some time now to plug yourself. Where can we find you? Anybody you want to thank?
Just thank my sponsors for this camp. You could find all of their information on my social media. I'm most active on Instagram, just mducote1. And my team, it's a wild time. So it's kind of cool to be able to do a COVID fight camp and see how it plays out.
For sure. So again, we do thank you. Before we go, I'm going to plug a few things myself. Guys, find me on Twitter at Big Riles MMA. I'll post stuff every day. Generally the website scouting reports up there once a week. We do have the archive of these shows on there as well. Check my workout there. Check them out at combatpress.com. Big shout out to Rob Tatum and Brian Henderson again. I do post these also on my Facebook, Riley Kontek. Other than that, check out MMA Intel for everything from UFC rankings, UFC predictions, scouting reports, top prospect rankings, top prospect upcoming fights. Lots of good stuff on that website. And like we said, our weekly scouting reports. And other than that, check this show out. It's weekly. Posted on Twitter, Facebook, and posted on the Loudmouth MMA Network as well. Check that out there. And again, shout out to my sponsor, Cornelius & Sons. Again, if you're in the state of Illinois and need homeowner work done, check out Cornelius & Sons on Facebook. Emily, thank you very much again, and good luck. Really looking forward to the fight on Friday.
Thank you so much.
So for Emily Ducote, who is main eventing this week, I am Riley Kontek saying enjoy the fights this weekend on Fight Pass. UFC is coming back next weekend. And as always, go fuck yourselves.